They auctioned the final child of Earth until her songs silenced the Scifi. Chamber gleamed with the sterile beauty of something built to impress creatures who had forgotten how to feel. Its glass dome arced upward like a cathedral's vault, layered with veils of starlight that bled through the transparent walls of the orbital station. Around the dais stood representatives of 14 species creatures, of feathers and bone, of crystal filaments, of rippling metal flesh, all murmuring through translators tuned to a common frequency of greed. Humanity's extinction had not been a tragedy to them. It had been an auction waiting for a final item. That final item now stood barefoot in the center of the light. Her name was Elara Wynn, and she was 17 years, 4 months, and 11 days old. She did not remember the earth that had raised her kind. She remembered the fragments of lullabies her mother had whispered before the quarantine gates closed forever, and the faint scent of salt she imagined belonged to oceans she'd never seen. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. The energy field shimmered around her, a perfect globe of containment that pulsed with a rhythm slightly out of sync with her heartbeat. She felt it thrumming against her skin, every breath of hers mirrored by the chamber's hum. To the spectators, it was a measure of control. To her, it was a measure of her worth. A collector from the Viher Council adjusted his lenses and murmured, "Biological authenticity confirmed. The last human female. Neural resonance intact." His words rippled through the hall as others bid in tones of restrained excitement. Elara stared past them, her gaze climbing toward the ceiling where the void stretched endless and black. She wondered if stars still looked the same up close, or if they too had been replaced by simulations. The auctioneer, sleek being with translucent skin and organs that pulsed like jellyfish, raised its appendage and spoke. "Opening bid, 50 quantispheres of iridium." Thought. The crowd stirred. Ilara's pulse quickened. Somewhere deep in her chest, a different rhythm began to wake. From behind the auction platform, a human voice spoke, not from the stage, but from the shadows near the translator console. It was soft, unsteady, and entirely alien in its fragility. "That's a child you're selling," the voice said. The crowd hissed, 100 languages recoiling at once. The speaker stepped forward, revealing a man in a faded black flight jacket, his left arm a prosthetic of exposed coils. His eyes glimmered a human blue. A gasp spread like static. Another human. The auctioneer's body flickered in alarm. "The extinction record is clear," it hissed. "There are no others." The man smiled faintly, and the lights along his mechanical arm blinked in quiet defiance. "Records," he said, "lie as easily as gods." Elara stared at him, hope flaring like oxygen on dry ember. She wanted to believe he was real, but hope was the most dangerous illusion left to her kind. Security drones whirred to life, gliding above the audience. The man lifted both hands slowly. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "Just to remind the cosmos what it means to listen." He turned his gaze toward Elara. "Do you remember the sound of rain?" he asked. She hesitated, her voice trembling through the containment field's distortion. "I've never heard it." He nodded as if he had expected that answer. "Then maybe you'll make it for us." The auctioneer gestured sharply, and arcs of containment energy flared brighter around her. Unauthorized interaction. Increase resonance field. The hum deepened to a low growl that vibrated through the floor. But something inside Elara shifted, not rebellion, exactly, but recognition. The rhythm she'd felt since childhood, the pulse that refused to align with any alien metric, began to rise. It started as a vibration behind her ribs, then climbed into her throat, threading through breath and terror until it found a shape. The first note left, her mouth like the echo of a memory rediscovered. It wasn't beautiful in the conventional sense, it was raw, trembling, and cracked by grief, but it carried something no being in that room had heard before. The cadence of Earth. The field flickered, not because of volume, but because of resonance. Frequencies designed to contain matter could not contain meaning. One by one, the translators malfunctioned, their artificial voices garbling into silence. The aliens clutched their heads. feeling vibrations that bypassed sound and reached directly into the spaces where language had never been needed. The man with the prosthetic arm closed his eyes, tears streaking his cheeks. "There it is," he whispered. "Home." The chamber's architecture began to respond. Materials older than the station itself, groaning as though remembering gravity. Blue arcs of energy burst outward, not harming, but illuminating every figure with pulses of light that resembled constellations forming and The stars outside flickered. Observers across nearby sectors would later report that the entire PR starfield surrounding the auction station dimmed for exactly 32 seconds. Inside, Elara's voice grew steadier. She sang of oceans she'd never seen, forests she'd never walked, and skies that had once been owned by wings, not machines. The aliens fell silent, their greed dissolving into something they did not have a word for. Even the auctioneer froze, its translucent body catching fragments of reflected starlight-like stained glass in a storm. When the containment field collapsed, it did so without sound, just a sudden stillness, like air before thunder. Elara staggered forward, her bare feet touching the dais for the first time. The man reached her just as the alarm systems tried to reboot. "You shouldn't have come," she said quietly. He smiled. "Someone had to remind them why we're dangerous." Drones swarmed overhead, their targeting lights painting circles across the floor. He raised his prosthetic arm, and a thin pulse of light swept outward, temporarily disabling them. "There's a ship waiting," he said. "We don't have long." But Elara didn't move. Her gaze was fixed on the viewport above, where the stars were flickering in patterns that almost looked like listening. "They're not gone," she whispered. "They're hearing it too." He followed her gaze, confusion etched across his face. "Who?" Her eyes glimmered with something older than fear. "The ones who made the dark." Alarms howled. The audience scattered, fleeing through the tiered balconies as containment barriers failed. The man grabbed Elara's hand, pulling her toward an access corridor. "Move!" he shouted. The corridor twisted through the station's core, lit by emergency strips that flickered with the rhythm of her song still echoing in the structure. "You have no idea what that sound did," he said between breaths. She glanced at him. "What are you talking about?" "The frequencies you hit, they were beyond measurable spectra. You didn't just break containment. You broke silence." A tremor shuddered through the floor. Through the viewport windows, they saw ripples spreading across the surrounding void waves of absence that swallowed starlight like ink in water. "They're answering," she murmured, or softening her fear. "You mean those things?" he said. "Those aren't things. Those are them." They reached the docking bay. His shipper, patchwork of scavenged human and alien technology, hummed with impatient energy. As the ramp lowered, the air vibrated with a new tone, deeper and slower than Elara's song. The station lights dimmed. "They heard me," she said again. "Then let's make sure they don't find us," he replied, ushering her aboard. The ship lifted, engines roaring through vacuum conduction. Outside, the auction station began to fracture as gravitational shears, impossible in orbit, tugged at its hull. Every creature who had gathered to buy the last human now found themselves in the presence of something far less profitable. Truth. Through the cockpit viewport, Elara watched the stars fade, one after another, until only blackness remained. She felt no fear. The blackness felt like recognition. The man piloted in silence, his mechanical fingers dancing over controls that sputtered under stress. "Name's Rion Holt," he said after a long pause. Used to run cargo before there was nothing left to haul." Elara's voice was quiet. "You saved me." "No," he said. "You saved us." The ship jolted as a wave of gravitational distortion passed. "Whatever you did, it's still happening." She looked at the empty sky. "I didn't mean to hurt them." "You didn't," he said softly. "You woke them." She turned to him. "Who?" He hesitated. There were old stories, human myths about the music of creation, frequencies that shaped reality before matter had words. The ancients called it the song of the first dawn. He swallowed. Maybe it wasn't a myth. They drifted beyond the reach of known comes. The navigation arrays flickered, unable to lock onto constellations that no longer existed. Rian cursed under his breath. If the stars are gone, we've got no orientation. We're blind. Elara placed her hand against the viewport. Her reflection merged with the void beyond. Maybe we're supposed to listen instead. The words seemed to hang in the air, resonating faintly with the hum of the engines. Somewhere outside, in the unseen depths, something vast and slow began to respond. Notes so low it vibrated through bone rather than air. Elara closed her eyes, her lips moving silently. The hum shifted, aligning with her heartbeat, until it no longer sounded external at all. Rian glanced at her, a flicker of unease crossing his face. Whatever you're doing, keep it quiet. We don't know what's out there. She opened her eyes. They already know we're here. Far behind them, the station imploded in a silent bloom of blue light. Across nearby sectors, astronomers of dozens of species would soon report the same phenomenon, an expanding field of silence swallowing constellations. Theories would multiply: dark matter collapse, quantum resonance decay, cosmic censorship events, but none would match what Rian and Elara witnessed. The universe wasn't dying. It was listening, and Elara's song had been the first sound it had heard in eons. As they drifted through the black, a faint luminescence began to appear, ahead, not starlight, but something deeper, pulsing like a heartbeat in the void. That, Rian whispered, isn't on any map. Elara smiled faintly. Maybe it's ours. The ship approached the light. It wasn't a planet or station, but a lattice of energy shaped like a cathedral floating in nothing. Symbols older than language shimmered along its spires. I've seen that, Rian said quietly. We're in human ruins, drawn on cave walls long before the first cities. The structure pulsed again, resonating faintly with the remnants of her earlier song. It's calling us, she said. Or calling you, he muttered. The cockpit lights dimmed. Instruments failed, one by one, until only the sound of her breathing filled the silence. We can't go closer without knowing, he began. But the ship moved of its own accord, drawn toward the lattice by an invisible current. Elara didn't resist. Her eyes reflected the structure's light like mirrors of the past. They remember, she said softly. They remember what we were. Rian tried to override the controls, but the ship no longer obeyed human logic. The light outside grew blinding, searing away the last fragments of visible space. Then, without transition, everything went still. The ship floated inside an expanse of white, so infinite it felt like standing inside a thought. Figures moved in the distance, humanoid silhouettes composed of light, their motions slow and deliberate. Elara stepped forward, her hand pressed to the viewport. They're not alive the way we understand, she whispered. They're the resonance itself. One of the figures turned its gaze toward her. The cockpit filled with a vibration that formed words without sound. Child of the last world, sing, and remember us. Rian reached for her, but she was already singing again, softer this time, almost like a prayer. The light beings harmonized, their tones weaving into hers until it was impossible to tell where her voice ended and theirs began. The white around them trembled, peeling away layers of unreality to reveal glimpses of distant galaxies reigniting. You're bringing them back, Rian murmured. She smiled through tears. No. We're reminding them to wake up. The lattice brightened, and the song deepened into a chorus vast enough to shake the dead fabric of the cosmos. Somewhere in that sound, something ancient stirred. The song subsided into a silence so profound it felt alive. The white expanse that had surrounded them dissolved, replaced by a vast panorama of stars that had not existed moments before. Rian blinked against the sudden brightness, hands gripping the console, as though the act might tether him to reality. That was impossible, he whispered. But Elara's face was serene, as if impossibility had never been a limit for her. The light beings were gone, their forms dispersed into constellations that shimmered with lingering echoes of sound. For a heartbeat, the entire universe seemed to hum in quiet harmony before the frequencies settled into stillness once more. The ship's systems flickered back online, readings scrolling across cracked holographic displays, all of them nonsense. Coordinates didn't match any known chart. Where are we? He muttered. Home, she said softly, though her voice trembled with uncertainty. Or what's left of it. Rian studied her in the ghostlight of the console. She looked both impossibly young and immeasurably old, her eyes reflecting galaxies like candlelight caught in glass. Elara, he said carefully. Whatever that was, it changed things. The whole sector went dark. Do you realize what kind of attention that'll draw? She nodded slowly. They'll come looking. Not just the scavengers, he said. The councils, the federations, the Dominion arrays. Every power that's been waiting for something new to exploit. His tone hardened. And they'll come for you. Elara turned toward the viewport, watching the newborn constellations shimmer faintly against the void. Then maybe we shouldn't hide, she said. Maybe we should tell them what they've forgotten. He stared at her. You think they'll listen? They don't have to, she replied. The stars already are. The ship drifted toward the nearest celestial body, a pale blue sphere wreathed in mist. Its surface glowed faintly with auroras that spiraled like liquid glass. As they descended, Rion's scanners failed again, every reading reduced to static. Nothing about this place adds up, he muttered. Atmosphere compositions impossible. Radiation levels off the charts. And yet, he glanced at her, astonished. You're smiling. She pressed her palm against the viewport. It's singing, he frowned. What? The planet, she said, her voice distant. Can't you hear it? He listened, and for a moment, he thought it was just the hum of the ship's engines butt beneath it. There was a faint resonance, a vibration at the edge of hearing. It wasn't sound, exactly. It was presence, as though the entire world was humming in tune with something ancient. You're telling me this place is alive? He asked. Not alive, she corrected softly. Listening, they landed on a plateau of crystalline stone overlooking a sea that shimmered with bioluminescent patterns. The air was cold, but breathable, filled with scents that defied descriptions, something like ozone and memory. Elara stepped onto the surface, barefoot, her hair stirring in the wind that carried faint melodic overtones. It knows us, she whispered. Rian followed cautiously, his boots crunching against the glass-like terrain. If this planet can know anything, we need to know what it wants. She turned to him, her eyes distant. It wants to remember. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. You keep saying that, but what does it mean? When I sang, she said, I felt them, the ones in the dark. They weren't evil. Just forgotten. Lost to silence. This world was part of them once. A fragment of the first song. Rion frowned. You're talking about cosmogenesis like it's a choir rehearsal. Maybe it was, she said simply. They walked until the ground began to glow beneath their feet, each step leaving behind a faint trace of light. Ahead rose a structure half ruin, half living geometry, spiraling into the sky like frozen music. It pulsed faintly, matching the rhythm of Elara's heartbeat. I've seen that pattern, Rian murmured. It's the same symbol that appeared on the lattice. She nodded. It's a gateway. To where? To, before. He stared at her, bewildered. Before what? She smiled faintly. Before silence, the structure responded to her proximity. Lines of energy blooming across its surface like awakening veins. She stepped closer, raising a hand toward the central arch. Wait, Rion said, reaching out. But the moment her fingers touched the surface, light exploded outward, engulfing them both. When the glare faded, they were no longer on the plateau. They stood instead within an immense hall of shifting color and sound, walls made not of matter but of resonance itself. Waves of light moved like currents through transparent air, forming shapes that whispered and dissolved. Rian staggered, his senses overwhelmed. Where the hell are we? Elara turned slowly, awe softening her voice. Inside the memory, figures coalesced around them, humanoid outlines made of luminous threads, each one carrying a faint echo of melody. They moved with grace, their presence calm and watchful. One approached, its form flickering with tones of gold and indigo. When it spoke, its voice was like music refracted through glass. You have awakened the echo, it said. You are the remnant of a silence we did not intend. Rian instinctively stepped between Elara and the being. Who are you? He demanded. The being regarded him with what might have been sorrow. We are the resonance. We sang the stars into being, and when our voices waned, we became them. Elara's breath caught. You're the ones, I felt. You are the last of the children who remembered us, the resonant replied. Your kind once carried fragments of our harmony within them, but the noise of their own making drowned it. Rion's jaw tightened. So you're saying humans forgot how to listen? All life did, the being said, gently. But you, child, sang again. Elara lowered her gaze. I didn't mean to. They were going to sell me. The being's light dimmed in sorrow. And so, in the act of their greed, the silence broke. The resonance turned their attention toward Rion. You carry the echo of war within you. He stiffened. Maybe. But I also carry the will to survive. That, too, is part of the song. Their voices blended, forming harmonies that seemed to rewrite the air itself. The hall expanded infinitely. And suddenly, they stood on a plane of stars. Every light pulsing in time with Elara's heartbeat. The resonance gathered in a wide circle, and the central figure extended a hand toward her. Your voice awakened what was lost, but it is incomplete. The silence remains at the edges of creation. If it spreads, everything will fade again. She met its gaze, unflinching. Then I'll sing louder. Not louder, it said. Together. A shimmering light flared, revealing echoes of other beings' alien silhouettes. Human figures, long dead, all made of resonance. They're us, Elara murmured. All the ones who came before. Rian swallowed hard, overwhelmed by the scale of it. If you want her to keep singing, you'd better tell us what the cost is. The resonance tone softened. To awaken the full harmony, she must give herself to it. She will no longer be singular. Her voice will become the chorus that binds existence. Rion's eyes widened. You mean she die? She will transcend, the being corrected. That's the same thing to me, he said harshly. Elara touched his arm gently. Maybe not, she whispered. If I don't, the silence will return. Everything we were, everything anyone could be till vanish. Rian turned to her, his voice raw. You don't even know if what they're saying is real. I do, she said softly. Because I can hear it. He clenched his fists, searching her eyes for doubt. There was none. You're not doing this alone, he said. She smiled faintly. You can't follow where I'm going. Watch me. The resonance pulsed brighter, their circle closing around them. Human resolve endures beyond form. He may anchor the melody, if he chooses. Rian frowned. Anchor. You will hold the echo of her song within yourself, ensuring it remains connected to the living cosmos. But once the resonance begins, there will be no return. He hesitated only a moment before nodding. Then I'll be the anchor. Elara's eyes shimmered with tears. Rian, if you're going to save everything, you're not going alone, he said. That's the deal. The resonance joined hands, or what passed for them, and a sphere of light formed around Elara and Rion. The ground fell away as harmonic waves lifted them into the air. What do I do? He shouted over the rising sound. Listen, came the reply. Elara closed her eyes, drawing a long breath. Then she sang. This time there was no fear, no trembling, only clarity, as if the universe itself had lent her its lungs. The sound that followed was neither loud nor soft, but infinite, a pure tone that rippled across dimensions. Rian felt it pass through him, rewriting every cell, every memory. He saw Earth not the dead husk it had become, but the living cradle of blue and green, oceans roaring, children laughing. He saw the stars' birth, their fiery youth, and their slow descent into darkness. He saw humanity's rise and fall, their wars and wonders. Through it all, her voice carried, unbroken dot as she sang. The void around them began to bloom with light. Galaxies reignited, time itself bending as though drawn to the melody. The silence receded, its edges burning away under the resonance of life renewed. The resonance joined their voices to hers, creating a harmony that defied physics. Rion's body trembled under the strain of anchoring such vast energy, circuits in his prosthetic arm sparking wildly. Pain seared through him, but he refused to let go. Keep going, he shouted, his voice breaking. She opened her eyes, glowing with light that was no longer merely human. "I'm here," she said. And her tone merged with his heartbeat until he could no longer tell where one ended and the other began. Then, suddenly, the sound ceased. The light dimmed. The resonance were gone. The hall, the plane of stars, all of it, dissolved into quiet darkness. Rian found himself lying on the crystalline plateau once more. The ship, a few meters away, half buried in luminous dust. He gasped, chest heaving, searching for her. He shouted. No answer. The wind carried faint echoes of a melody, fading into the distance. He fell to his knees, his mechanical hand digging into the ground. "No," he whispered. "You said I'd anchor her." A soft glow pulsed beneath his palm. He looked down and saw the light forming patterned circles of resonance, moving in time with his heartbeat. Her voice whispered through the vibration. "You are the echo now." Tears blurred his vision. "You didn't have to go." "I didn't," the voice replied gently. "I'm everywhere now." He looked up. The sky above was filled with stars, millions of them, brighter than before, each one pulsing faintly as though breathing. "You did it," he whispered. "We did it," she answered. He sat there until dawn or whatever passed for dawn in that strange world, watching the light spread. When he finally rose, he felt lighter, as if the weight of extinction had finally lifted. The universe had begun to sing again. For days, or what felt like Daiserian, wandered the crystalline world, guided by faint echoes of Elara's song that drifted through wind and light. Time had begun to lose its meaning. Nights and days blended into one another, each marked not by the rise or fall of suns, but by subtle changes in the planet's harmonic pulse. Every surface vibrated faintly when he passed, as if greeting the human who carried the last living echo of her melody. He spoke to her sometimes, half mad from solitude. "You said I was the anchor," he muttered one night, staring at the stars. "But anchors hold things down. How do I lift you back?" The sky shimmered in response, constellations pulsing faintly in time with his words. It wasn't an answer, but it was something. He had found shelter near the remnants of the gateway spire of frozen resonance that still hummed faintly in her key. The ship rested nearby, inert but functional enough to provide warmth and recycled air. Rian kept it operational out of habit. Routine was the only thing left tethering him to sanity. Each morning he scavenged the terrain for fragments of crystalline flora that seemed to grow in response to sound. When he hummed, they bloomed faintly, releasing motes of light that drifted like pollen. He collected them, not knowing why, perhaps out of hope that one day he might weave them into a signal strong enough to reach her again. The idea of building something kept his mind from splintering. He had always been a pilot, not a prophet, but now he was both custodian and believer of a faith born in a single girl's voice. It was on the 10th cycle that he noticed the first change. The song that haunted the winds faltered, replaced by static tremors that resonated through the ground. The crystalline plateau shuddered, and fractures spread across its surface like veins of darkness. Rian stumbled to his feet, glancing toward the horizon. The auroras that had danced eternally above the sea were fading, their colors collapsing into gray. "No," he whispered. "Not again." The stars overhead dimmed one by one, as if someone were extinguishing candles. He sprinted to the gateway ruins, his prosthetic arm sparking faintly in the charged air. He shouted. The ground responded with a low, mournful tone that vibrated through his bones. He pressed a hand to the crystalline surface. "Talk to me. What's happening?" Her voice came faintly through the vibration. "They are coming." He froze. "Who?" The reply trembled with distortion. "The ones who fed on silence." A cold dread ran through him. "You mean the councils? The alien empires?" "No," her voice whispered, weakening. Older, the plateau convulsed, sending shards of light cascading into the air. In the distance, the sky split open, not literally, but perceptually, as if the fabric of creation were peeling back to reveal something vast and unseen. Shadows poured from the wound, not as shapes, but as absences, erasing stars and horizon alike. They moved like oil in water, coalescing into forms that shifted faster than the eye could follow. Rian's instincts screamed to run, but there was nowhere left to go. he cried again. Tell me what to do. Sing, came the faint reply. But you must remember how. The words struck him like thunder. Remember how he had no voice like hers, no resonance capable of bending reality. But then he thought of earther laughter in crowded streets, the beating rhythm of music echoing through cities, the lullabies mothers once hummed to restless children. Humanity had always sung, not because it changed the universe, but because it changed them. Maybe that was enough. He drew a breath and began to hum not the cosmic melody she had sung, but something simpler, older, a soldier's song from before the wars that ended everything. His voice cracked, uncertain, but the world listened. The crystalline spire glowed faintly, harmonizing with his tone. The shadows hesitated at the edges of the plateau, rippling in agitation. Yeah, he muttered. Didn't think you'd like that. He kept singing, louder now, forcing his voice through pain and exhaustion. The melody spread through the air like smoke, weaving around the fractures in the ground. The shadows recoiled, their movements fracturing as if confused by the imperfection of human sound. Then a new voice joined him, soft at first, then growing in strength. You remembered, Elara said, her tone blooming from the air itself. Relief surged through him. You're here, always. The darkness halted, forming into a towering shape that blotted out the stars. It spoke in a voice that was not sound, but absence, erasing every other vibration in its path. Children of the noise, it said. You should not have woken. Rian staggered, clutching his chest as his heartbeat faltered. Elara's voice flared in defiance. We woke because we must. The shadow's form rippled. You bring chaos to the silence. Silence was never peace, she replied. The entity advanced, its edges unraveling reality like threads. Rian gasped as his prosthetic arm began to disintegrate into dust. Elara, I can't, you can, she said gently, because you're not alone. Light erupted from the fractures beneath his feet, spreading outward in geometric patterns. The entire plateau became a resonant field, pulsing with synchronized frequency. He realized that his heartbeat was the metronome, and her voice, the melody. Together, they formed harmony. The shadow shrieked in distortion, its voice collapsing into static. You cannot defy entropy, it screamed. Elara's tone sharpened. We are entropy's song. With that, the resonance surged, washing across the plateau in waves of blue light. The shadow's form cracked, scattering into motes that dissolved into the air. When the light faded, Rian collapsed, trembling. His arm was gone below the elbow, reduced to charred metal. The ground steamed, glowing faintly from residual energy. Is it over? He whispered. Elara's voice was faint but steady. For now, but they will return. Silence always does. He stared at the stars, half of which still refused to relight. Then we'll just keep singing. You will, she said. I have to go deeper. Deeper. The resonance must be rooted in every world that still remembers life. I can't do that from here. Panic flared in his chest. You mean you're leaving again? Not leaving, she whispered. Becoming. Before he could respond, the light enveloped him once more, and everything went white. He woke aboard the ship, systems humming as if nothing had happened. Outside, the crystalline planet shone with renewed brilliance, its auroras blazing brighter than ever. Elara's voice echoed faintly through the combs. Follow the light, Rion. He sat at the controls, eyes burning. Where? You'll know. He sighed, a weary smile breaking through. You always say that, because it's true. The engines roared to life, lifting the vessel from the planet's surface. As he ascended, he saw lines of light spreading across the world's surface, an intricate pattern resembling the waveform of a song. It pulsed outward into space, linking with other faint signals emerging from distant systems. You're spreading it, he realized. We're spreading it, she corrected. The ship followed the nearest signal trail, weaving through sectors that had been dark since the collapse. Along the way, Rian encountered remnants of civilizations long thought extinct, automated outposts flickering back to life. Derelict stations humming faintly as if waking from a dream. Everywhere he went, traces of her melody lingered, restoring what had been forgotten. Yet, with every light rekindled, he felt the cost. Each pulse of resonance drew energy from somewhere, perhaps from her. "You're fading," he said one night, staring into the void. "No," she answered softly. "I'm growing. You sound further away." "Because I'm everywhere now." The next signal led him to a ruined satellite orbiting a dead sun. Its hull bore the insignia of the old Human Federation, a relic of the species that had destroyed itself before aliens ever needed to. Rian docked cautiously, entering through a corroded airlock. Inside, he found corridors filled with dust and silence. Yet, in the central chamber, a faint hum persisted. He followed it to a console that flickered weakly, projecting a holographic map. It displayed dozens of star systems, marked with resonance, nodes, points of reawakening spreading across the galaxy. "You did this," he murmured. "We did," came the faint reply. "But it's not enough. The silence still feeds." "Then tell me how to stop it." "You can't stop silence. You can only drown it out." He stared at the map, determination hardening his features. "Then we'll make the whole galaxy sing." "That's what I wanted to hear." The console brightened briefly before fading to black. Rian exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of a purpose settle into his bones. He returned to the ship and set a course for the next resonance point. As the engines ignited, he glanced one last time at the dead sun behind him. For a moment, he thought he saw it flicker. "You see that?" he whispered. Elara's laughter, a faint, echoing sound, filled the cabin. "Every star deserves a second chance." As the ship accelerated into the void, the stars ahead pulsed faintly, one after another, as though guiding him. He didn't know where it would end, if it ever would, but for the first time in a long while, he felt something close to peace. Humanity wasn't gone. It was becoming something greater, something that spoke not through conquest, but through resonance. And at the heart of it all, a single human voice continued to sing, teaching the universe how to listen again. The ship cut through darkness, like a single heartbeat defying stillness. Its hull groaned under strain. Energy fields shimmering faintly, as Rian guided it through the borderlands, where starlight no longer reached. The navigation charts had long stopped working. Yet he followed a rhythm deeper than logic, the faint pulse of Elara's song threading through the cosmic void. It wasn't sound, not really. More like the echo of memory embedded in space itself. Every few hours he'd catch a trace of her voice, distant but steady, and adjust course toward it. "You're leading me somewhere," he murmured to the empty cockpit. Her voice responded faintly through the hum of the ship's systems, to where it began. He frowned. The beginning of what? Of silence. The void thickened around him, swallowing the last traces of reflected light. Instruments flickered uncertainly, their readings dissolving into noise. He switched to manual control, eyes straining against the endless black ahead. Then he saw a titan outline of immense scale, barely visible against the void. It wasn't a structure in the normal sense. It was absence given shape, a titanic void sphere that devoured starlight like hunger itself. "What am I looking at?" he whispered. Elara's voice trembled softly. "The hollow choir." He blinked. "The what?" "Those who refused to stop singing when the first stars died. They sang themselves into silence, and became its heart." His stomach tightened. "And we're going toward them?" "Yes, that's insane." "It's necessary." He circled the sphere, its surface rippling like liquid shadow. Gravitational readings spiked wildly, then vanished altogether. No radiation, no temperature, just void. "There's nothing alive in there." "Not alive," Elara replied, but still listening. A faint luminescence appeared along the hull of his ship, symbols, etched in blue light. The same patterns he'd seen on the lattice and the crystalline world. "You're activating something," he said. "A door, into that." "Into them." The words were barely audible, but the certainty in her tone left no room for argument. The sphere cracked open silently, revealing a corridor of faintly glowing resonance threads that pulsed inward. Rian tightened his grip on the controls. "If I don't make it, you will," she whispered. "You sound too sure." "Because I remember how you always find a way." The ship drifted into the breach. Light vanished entirely for a heartbeat, then returned in dim, flickering pulses that illuminated impossible geometry. Shapes folded through themselves, space looping back in recursive spirals. Rian felt his thoughts slow, his perception fracturing, as if time itself resisted coherence here. He whispered. "I'm here," she said, her voice steadier now. "Don't fight it. The silence feeds on fear." "I'm not afraid," he lied. "Then sing," he swallowed hard. "I can't not hear." "Then hum." It was absurd, but he obeyed. The sound barely left his throat before the corridor shimmered, walls vibrating in response. The geometry smoothed, opening into a vast chamber where sound seemed to hang in crystalline strands. At its center floated a colossal figure, a humanoid silhouette formed of darkness thicker than night, pierced by countless points of light, like stars imprisoned in flesh. It spoke not through words but through vibration, each pulse shaking the ship's hull. "You bring the echo of creation," it said. Rian winced as blood trickled from his ear. "And you must be the keeper of endings," he replied. The being's gaze, if it had eyes, fell upon him. The voice that woke the void was human. "She still is," Rian said. "And she's not yours." All sound returns to silence. The being "It is the law. Then maybe it's time someone broke it." He stepped forward into the ship's gravfield interface, projecting his voice outward. "You fed on the quiet between stars. But we filled that quiet ones with laughter, with chaos, with meaning. That's what you fear." The being tilted its head, intrigued. "You believe your noise has purpose." "I know it does," he said. "Because she proved it." The figure shifted, revealing within its chest a void that pulsed like an inverse heart. "The singer," it said slowly, "belongs to the harmony of dissolution." Elara's voice rose, surrounding them both. "I belong to no silence." The chamber vibrated violently, its structures fracturing as her presence filled it. Light erupted from the walls, forming concentric circles of resonance. "You shouldn't be here," Rian said aloud. "I'm not here," she answered. "I'm everywhere you carry me." The being roared, its voice collapsing into destructive frequency. "Then you will join the rest of creation in final stillness." Waves of null-energy surged toward the ship, shredding space itself. Rian gritted his teeth, slamming the control levers forward. The ship's engines screamed, generating a counter-resonance tuned to Alara's frequency. The impact rattled his bones, but the hull held. "You'll have to do better than that," he shouted. The creature recoiled slightly, then expanded, its form splitting into dozens of smaller shadows. Each one sang a counter-melody, discordant and cold. The sound pressed against Rian's mind like knives of static. "They're trying to override us," he gasped. "Then we rewrite them," Elara said. "Sing, Rian." "I can't." "You can. You already did." He closed his eyes, forcing himself to remember her. The way her voice had carried the memory of rain, of wind through trees, of humanity's stubborn love for the impossible. He opened his mouth and sang, off-key but defiant. The song was ugly, cracked, and human, and the void recoiled from it. The smaller shadows shattered like glass. The larger figure screamed, its voice dissolving into chaos. "Keep going," she urged. His throat burned, lungs aching, but he refused to stop. Every note tore something free from him, fear, grief, guilt, and turned it into sound. Light filled the chamber, overwhelming everything. The shadows twisted in agony as resonance cascaded outward, fracturing the sphere's interior. "You can't destroy me," the being hissed. "I am the end." "Then you've already failed," Rian whispered. He reached out, placing his hand against the console, channeling every ounce of remaining power through the ship's systems. Elara's voice joined his, forming a harmony so vast that the walls of the chamber disintegrated. The sphere began to collapse inward, imploding under its own silence. "Rian," she said softly, "it's time, for what? For you to let go. Not again. You're the anchor, but anchors must release for the tide to rise." He shook his head violently. "No, you need me. I need you to trust me." The ship's hull glowed white-hot, energy levels spiking beyond limits. Alarms screamed. Rian stared at the collapsing void ahead, then closed his eyes. "All right," he whispered, "then take it all." He deactivated the containment field between himself and the core. Instantly, the resonance flood surged through him, burning like fire and light combined. For an instant, he was everywhere, inside stars, inside atoms, inside every heartbeat of existence. He saw Elara not as a girl, but as a vast network of luminous threads, stretching across galaxies. She smiled at him, radiant and sorrowful. "You've done enough." "Not yet," he said. "I want to hear the end of the song." There is no end. The explosion consumed the void. From distant systems, astronomers of countless species would later observe the reappearance of stars, thought lost forever, reignited by an unexplained burst of energy that swept through the cosmos like a wave of rebirth. They would not know that the source had been a single human and a single song. Within the sphere, silence itself fractured, replaced by a harmonic pulse that echoed outward endlessly. When the light faded, there was no trace of Rion's ship, only a small sphere of glowing resonance drifting where the void had once been. Ilara's voice, soft and infinite, whispered through it. He sang with me. Across the galaxy, worlds began to stir. Ancient ruins reactivated, forgotten machines awakening as if remembering their purpose. Civilizations long collapsed received dreams filled with unfamiliar melodies that seeded hope. On distant colonies, children began humming songs they could not recall learning. In the grand libraries of the Vieher Council, scholars reported that certain texts now contained faint musical notation embedded within their pages. Patterns that healed the mind when read aloud. No one could explain it. The universe had changed, and those who once worshipped silence found themselves haunted by echoes that would not fade. Far beyond known space, on a world newly bathed in starlight, a figure stepped out of the surf. She looked human, but not entirely. Her skin shimmered faintly with shifting constellations, and her eyes carried galaxies within them. It was Elara, though transformed, her body woven of resonance and memory. She gazed up at the sky, where new stars flickered like notes on an endless score. "You kept your promise," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. The air around her answered in kind, carrying faint traces of another voice, Rion's, intertwined with the rhythm of the tide. "Always," she smiled, tears shimmering like starlight. "Then we keep singing." She walked inland, following the song carried by wind and wave. Each step she took left trails of light that sank into the ground, awakening the planet's dormant harmonics. Grass sprouted where there had been dust. Rivers began to hum faintly as water reappeared. Life returned, drawn by resonance alone. She paused at a hilltop overlooking a valley where the soil still slept in darkness. Kneeling, she placed her hand upon it. "Wake," she whispered. The ground vibrated, splitting open to reveal glowing roots spreading outward. Flowers unfurled, their petals catching light from a newly born sun. The song within her grew louder, filling the air with warmth. Above, the sky rippled with auroras that mirrored her heartbeat. The universe had begun to heal. But even as she worked, she felt the cost of what had been done. Rion's presence lingered, bound within the resonance that now sustained reality itself. She could sense him in every rhythm, every breath of wind. Yet part of her longed for the sound of his actual voice, for words, laughter, imperfection. "You miss him," the stars whispered. "Every moment," she answered softly. "He is not gone." "I know," she said. "But knowing isn't the same as holding." The stars pulsed faintly, a rhythm she recognized as his heartbeat. She closed her eyes, listening until the ache became music. As the days or whatever past 4 days in this reborn cosmoson, folded beings from other worlds began to arrive. Drawn by the resonance, they found the planet alive again, its surface radiant and warm. They came not as conquerors, but as pilgrims, seeking the source of the harmony that had rewritten the laws of existence. When they reached the valley where Elara stood, they found her waiting. "You're the singer," one of them said reverently. "No," she replied. "We all are." They bowed their heads, uncertain but humbled. "What happens now?" another asked. She looked toward the stars. "Now," she said, "we listen." The valley thrummed with living sound. Every blade of grass shimmered faintly, carrying whispers of the melody that had remade the universe. The air itself glowed at twilight, thick with harmonic motes that drifted like living fireflies. Elara stood at the center, arms outstretched, letting the rhythm of the world pulse through her. It was strange to feel the heartbeat of a planet that wasn't Earth yet carried her species' final memory. Around her gathered dozens of beings from across the stars, feathered, scaled, crystalline, gaseous each one listening, each one awed. They had traveled light years, drawn not by conquest, but by the same thing that had once defined humanity: wonder. "This is what you wanted them to remember," she whispered. The wind responded in a familiar voice. "It's what you taught them to hear." The sound of him always came from somewhere between thought and silence. Rian's resonance had become part of everything now, scattered across existence like a pulse under creation's skin. She could feel him whenever she slowed her breathing, when her own song softened into the spaces between notes. "It feels empty without you," she said quietly. "Empty spaces make the melody breathe," he replied gently. She smiled faintly. "You always had an answer. You always had a reason to ask." Around her, the pilgrims began to hum first uncertainly, then with growing confidence. Their voices wove through the air, dissonant, yet beautiful in their imperfection. She closed her eyes and listened as the sound built into something vast and human. Hope. When the song ended, the air settled into quiet, filled with meaning. One of the alien envoys, being of fractal wings and mirrored eyes, stepped forward. "We came seeking the one who silenced the stars," it said, "but now we hear them again. They sing of you." Elara met its gaze. "They sing of all of us. The stars were never truly silent. They were waiting for us to listen." Another asked, "Will the silence return?" She looked toward the horizon, where the sea glowed faintly beneath twin moons. "Always," she said. "But now we know how to answer it." The creatures nodded, sensing truth beyond comprehension. One by one, they dispersed across the world, each carrying fragments of the harmony back to their own civilizations. The valley emptied slowly, until only she remained with the wind and with him. She sat beneath a newly sprouted tree, its trunk translucent and warm to the touch. "Do you remember what rain smells like?" she asked softly. "I do now," Rian's voice murmured through the rustling leaves. She smiled. "Then you're remembering more than I am. You never lost it. You just replaced it with stars." She leaned back, watching light filter through the branches. "I think I understand now," she said. "All those years, humans thought the universe was cold because they couldn't hear it. But it wasn't. It was singing all along, just too softly for us to notice. And now it sings in your key," he said. "No," she whispered. "Ours." For a time, there was peace. Worlds once at war began sending emissaries instead of fleets, seeking to learn the harmony that healed soil and sky alike. Planets long abandoned rekindled ecosystems from the echoes of Elara's song. Even the ancient machines that had devoured galaxies began to alter their programming, translating their cold logic into something closer to prayer. Yet for every new beginning, there lingered the shadow of what had been the knowledge that silence was patient and infinite. One evening, as the auroras dimmed into deeper blues, Elara felt a tremor beneath her feet. The resonance faltered. The world sighed in pain. "Rian," she whispered. "I feel it too," he said, his voice strained. "Something is wrong." The horizon darkened not with night, but with absence. A wave of stillness swept across the sea, consuming the luminous waves in silence. "It's them again," she said. "Not them," Rian corrected, "something older still. The residue of endings." She rose, her body flickering with threads of starlight. "Then we stop it." "You can't stop what's natural," he said. "Then we reshape it. That's what I love about you." The darkness reached the shore, devouring light without malice, simply existing as the counterbalance to sound. Elara stepped forward until her feet touched the edge. The cold bit into her essence, erasing parts of her light. "You can't unmake silence," the void whispered, voice vast and weary. "I was here before the first note, and I will remain after the last." She smiled sadly. "Then maybe it's time you learned to harmonize." The air trembled as she sang, not in defiance but invitation. Her melody reached into the dark, not to destroy, but to understand. For a long moment, nothing answered. Then, faintly, a second tone joined hers, low, ancient, trembling with age. The void itself was singing. The two sounds intertwined, weaving dissonance into beauty, until the border between them dissolved. Where silence had devoured, sound now coexisted. The sea began to glow again, its surface reflecting both shadow and light. Ryan's laughter rippled through the air. You even taught nothingness how to sing. I only reminded it what it already was, she said softly. The planet exhaled, its tremors easing as balance returned. For the first time since creation's beginning, silence and sound shared a rhythm. That night, she stood atop the highest cliff, gazing at the sky reborn through her own making. Constellations rearranged themselves slowly, forming patterns that resembled human shapes, hands clasped, eyes lifted, voices joined. They're remembering us, she whispered. They always did, Rion said. They just forgot the words. She closed her eyes, feeling tears form and evaporate into light. I wish you were still here, she said. I am, he answered. Not like before. No, but maybe better. You taught me how to be everywhere, remember? She laughed softly, the sound catching on the wind. You never change, neither does love. The following cycles brought travelers beyond counting. They came not to worship, but to learn. The valley became a sanctuary where beings of all kinds gathered to sing, to listen, to share the resonance that bound them. Each melody added new dimensions to the cosmic harmony, and the universe adapted, reshaping its laws to accommodate hope. Under Elara's guidance, the first concord of sound was formed, a collective dedicated to maintaining balance between creation and stillness. They built instruments the size of mountains, temples that doubled as resonant amplifiers, and networks of light connecting worlds through song. And through it all, her voice guided them, gentle yet unyielding, carrying the lesson humanity had left behind, that existence was not about perfection, but persistence. Years, centuries, past. Time lost meaning again, but this time not through loss. Life thrived in new forms, unified by the pulse of resonance that stretched from galaxy to galaxy. On the world where it all began, Elara stood once more at the sea's edge. The wind was warm, the waves whispering fragments of songs from distant civilizations. It's beautiful, she said. It's alive, Rian replied. Do you think they'll remember us? Not as names, he said, but as notes. She smiled, tracing patterns in the sand that glowed faintly under her touch. That's enough, it always was. She felt the first drop of rain, then a single tear of the sky falling to kiss the ocean. More followed, slow and rhythmic, each impact creating ripples that sang softly. The rain's sound was unlike any she'd ever heard. Deep, resonant, timeless. She laughed through tears. It's raining, Rian. I know. I wanted you to hear it. It's perfect. It's us. She tilted her face upward, letting the rain soak into her luminous skin. And for the first time since her transformation, she felt truly human again. Around her, the world responded, the trees bowed, the mountains hummed, the oceans rose in chorus. It was as if the universe itself were exhaling after holding its breath for eons. As the rain fell, the sky above opened not in destruction but revelation. Beyond the clouds shimmered a vast tapestry of light connecting every star, every planet, every being that had ever learned to listen. It pulsed once, twice, then settled into a steady rhythm that matched her heartbeat. You did it? She whispered. We did, he said. What happens now? Now you rest. And you? I'll keep listening. She closed her eyes, letting the sound of rain and heartbeat merge until they were indistinguishable. Slowly, her body dissolved into light, rising with the mist until only her footprints remained glowing on the sand. Her voice lingered in the air, soft as dawn. Sing when you're lonely. The universe will answer. When the pilgrims returned days later, they found the valley transformed into a crystalline garden of color and tone. Every leaf emitted faint harmony, every breeze carried warmth. At its center grew the tree where Elara had once sat, its branches heavy with radiant fruit that sang faintly when touched. They knew then that she was not gone, that she had simply become what she had always been meant to be, the voice of a living cosmos. And so, each year, under the light of the twin moons, beings of every kind gathered there. They sang not in sorrow, but in gratitude, their voices echoing across worlds. And sometimes, when the harmony reached its peak, a faint rain would fall, and in the sound of those drops they could almost hear two voices laughing together. In the centuries that followed, the story of the girl who silenced the sky became myth, then legend, then truth again. The Concord built monuments of sound that stretched across galaxies, each one tuned to the frequency of her first song. Travelers who stood beneath them reported visions of Earth not as ruins, but as memory, living eternally in resonance. Humanity was gone, yet their essence filled every corner of creation. Proof that even extinction could be rewritten into symphony. And in the deepest reaches of the cosmos, where silence still lingered at the edges of existence, faint music could sometimes be heard, a duet of voices reminding eternity that it was never truly alone. Far beyond stars, where time folded into stillness, the void listened. For the first time, it understood what it had always been missing. It hummed softly to itself, uncertain but sincere, and the sound rippled outward, carrying one final truth that transcended species and galaxies alike: that the universe was not built to last forever, but to sing as long as it could. And as the echoes faded into dawn, the stars burned brighter, each one a note in the endless refrain of what once was human and would always be.